On the morning of August 19th, 2019, in the small village of Patrickivo, Russia, Daniil, a teenage male, was abruptly woken by a phone call. His friend, whose voice was tense and urgent, revealed that their mutual friend Timur had sent disturbing messages during the night. "You need to check on him," his friend insisted. Timur lived just next door, so Daniil hurriedly dressed and made his way over. "At first, I thought Timur might just be feeling unwell," Daniil would later recall. He knocked on the door, expecting the usual bustling sounds of the household. Timur's younger siblings laughing, his grandparents chatting with his mother, the lively atmosphere that always greeted him. But that morning, there was nothing, only silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel on edge. No one answered his knock. The door, ominously ajar, was calling him to walk inside. Yet his heart was pounding with a mixture of fear and dread. Unsure of what to do next, Daniil called his friend back and he told him to go to the tower. It was at this tower that Daniil would uncover a horrifying scene that was the end of a series of brutal murders. I wanted to talk about this case as Timur seemed like the golden child. There seemed to be no warning signs for these tragic events, and that's what makes this case truly terrifying. But before we dive in, I want to let you know about my second channel called Grim Tales, where I am covering true stories that are shocking but not murderous. I think if you find this content interesting, then you should see what's over there. Link to the channel is in the comments. And if you find this video interesting, then please drop it a like, as it really helps. And please give me a follow on Instagram over here. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. Timur Kamalevdinov, just 16 years old, lived with his mother, 2 younger siblings and grandparents in the village of Patrickivo. The house was modest and it was a simple life, and the family was so proud of their bright and ambitious son. Timur excelled in his studies, earning recognition both at school and on a national level. His achievements shone a light on his family. He even appeared on a TV show called Clever Clever, and although he didn't make it past the qualifying round, Timur showed great maturity beyond his years, simply by shrugging off the disappointment and confidently declaring that next year would be his turn to shine. But tragically, that next year would never come. But life wasn't always easy for Timur. His mother, Marina, described him as a peculiar child. As an infant, Timur cried incessantly, 2 to 3 hours a day, frustrating his relatives. He refused to sleep without his mother, putting a tremendous strain on her. Marina admitted that sometimes when overwhelmed, she had to leave him alone during his fits and locked herself in the kitchen until he calmed down. In his early years, Timur's aggression often surfaced at home. He destroyed TVs, sound systems and refrigerators, and various other household items. Yet in public, he was a different child. Marina wrote in her blog, "He easily connects with people and has a good memory. Studying comes easy to him, though he is a bit lazy, as often boys are." As he started to get older, he mellowed out and became a model pupil. Marina said, and quote, "After 15 years, he became independent and self-sufficient. Nobody is sitting on my neck. An advanced young man. I don't know how it happened. Probably because I didn't impose any training on him. No circles. He went there, tried, stopped. I saved money on orthodox books and children's encyclopedias. He wasn't interested in it at all. He just knew the world. Now he's a walking encyclopedia." Marina firmly believed that the key to raising a child was to observe without too much interference. Marina wrote, "People started congratulating me, telling me how wonderful it was that I had raised such a good son, a great young man. But here's the secret. I simply watched. I barely interfered in his life." Timur's father wasn't present during his early years, battling an addiction to alcohol, but as he entered his teen years, his father did start to visit him in Patrakivo. They would spend the day together before his father returned to his own village, often leaving Timur some pocket money. Timur would usually spend this on games for his PC, a passion that consumed much of his time. He aspired to study computer science and would often stay up late into the night, playing until the very early hours of the morning. One of Timur's friends said that he was trying to make money on the internet because he wanted to help the family financially. Marina had been out of work for some time, but in 2014, she secured a job as an accountant in the city of Ulanovsk. It was there that she met a man and began a relationship, and soon she became pregnant with twins. However, when she informed the man, he cut off all communication, making it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her or the children. Marina never spoke of him or to him again. As the financial pressure mounted, Marina, now pregnant and struggling, decided to move back to her parents' home in Patrakivo with the then 11-year-old Timur. Unemployed and in a difficult situation, Marina had been borrowing money and taking out loans. It was a challenging time for her. Once back at her parents', Marina started a blog called My Success Story and Life. In this, she documented all aspects of her life in detail. Many posts were about Timur. She gave birth to the twins on Timur's birthday, later blogging, "For Timur's birthday, I gave him a brother and a sister." However, after the birth, Marina spiraled into a depression. She lost interest in her work as an accountant and began to drink heavily. One of her blog posts read, "Work, child, home, same thing. Increasingly, I drank alone in the evenings. It was getting harder to go to work in the morning. I worked all day with a headache, and by the evening, everything passed, and I drank again." The family were mainly supported by the grandparents' pension by this point, as whatever work Marina was bringing in, it was not enough. Her constant drinking brought her to confrontations with her mother about how she was raising her kids. The situation became so dire that the grandmother called social services several times. Yet, the drinking didn't stop until Marina became seriously ill. She said, and quote, "My child was finishing 9th grade and I almost lost him. I was seriously ill for about a year and he was left to himself. I've never worried about him because he easily converges with other people." At 40 years of age, Marina had a stroke. She was taken into hospital, and upon her release, the drinking stopped. But just 6 months later, she was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm. This is another quote from her blog. "By the age of 40, except for children, I had made nothing. I just lost and continued to lose. No work, no friends, no personal life, no own real estate. Fate was clamping me tighter and tighter. One problem covered another." The black stripe continued. "I'm so used to this condition that I no longer paid attention to the troubles in my life." Marina found a new way to make money, one that she genuinely enjoyed. She became an online coach and teacher, blending horoscopes, esotericism, and astrology into her work. It almost resembled a cult-like practice. Some would say it was pseudo-teaching, but it brought much needed income into the household. Marina offered paid consultations and taught life lessons. This teaching was called Human Design. From her teachings, Marina labeled Timur as a manifester. According to Human Design, this is a rare type of person who doesn't obey others, but whose behaviors must be tolerated. She took pride in this label for her son, saying that only 7% of people are manifestors. In her diary, she mentioned that those who aren't initiated in Human Design simply wouldn't understand it. This began a change in Marina. Her life began to revolve around the world of these teachings, and she began to behave differently. It's difficult to determine how much this semi-occult lifestyle impacted the family as a whole. But one thing that was causing friction was the competition for Marina's affection. She admitted herself to being hands-off with Timur, allowing him to make his own mistakes. but I'm thinking, how much was she really there for him on the day-to-day? Her blog posts talk of 5 relationships with men. Add on top of this the young twins. How thinly was she spreading herself? Relatives would later say that shortly before the incident took place, there was more friction because of Timur's aunt's wedding. It was taking place and he wanted to go, but he wasn't allowed, as he was told to stay at home and look after his young siblings. He was angry and stated that he was not, and quote, a free nurse. Now, if he was saying this, you can only imagine how often this was happening. It was also during this time that Timur began to rebel. Although he was slacking off from his studies, he was still able to pass everything with relative ease. But it was his social circle that took a different turn. Like most teenagers, he began to drink and started smoking and staying out later than he should. His friends were known to the police and regularly got in trouble with them. He was with them on the eve of the attack. They were all drinking together, and Timur started to say that he was fed up with life and he wanted to leave, but that he wanted to take his family with him. His friends thought that this was just a weird joke. None of them took this seriously. But Timur was deadly serious. On the night of August 19th, 2019, Timur returned home from a late walk. The house was silent, everyone asleep, except for him. Quietly, he grabbed an axe that was already inside the house and made his way to his mother's bedroom, where the twins were also sleeping in a separate bed. Without hesitation, he approached the twins and began swinging the axe with terrifying force. The attack was brutal. The only positive thing is that they would have passed quickly. The noise woke his mother, but before she could react, Timur struck her in the head with the axe, killing her instantly. In the next room, the grandparents were awoken by the commotion. As his grandfather opened the bedroom door to investigate, Timur was already there, and with one swift blow to the skull, his grandfather collapsed in the doorway, lifeless. His grandmother, now sitting up in bed, screamed in terror as Timur approached her, and with another final strike to the skull, he ended her life as well. After murdering his entire family, Timur placed the axe in the utility room. He then called a friend, but it was late, so there was no answer. Instead, he left a voice note explaining what he had done. He also mentioned that he never intended to murder his grandparents, but once the killing began, he could not bear the thought of them having to live with the consequences of his actions. He told his friend that he was heading towards the tower to end it all. Timur did exactly this. He climbed to the top of the tower. Not long after, a neighbour would eventually walk into the family home. They did this because they noticed the usual signs of life were not there. They quickly found the grandfather in the doorway, blood spatter all over the walls. The police were quickly notified. When searching the home, officers found a note left by Timur, where he said that he had been thinking about doing this for a long time. He wrote that he couldn't bear the thought of his mother suffering without him, so she had to go, and he couldn't leave his younger siblings as orphans, so they had to die as well. His reasoning was chilling and twisted. Psychologists offered various theories about what might have driven Timur to commit such an act. One report suggested that he may have been competing for his mother's affection, viewing the twins as rivals who had to be eliminated. However, Timur's aunt disagreed, insisting that there were no apparent issues within the household, and everyone seemed generally happy. Another theory was that Timur could have been struggling with undiagnosed mental disorders, which he managed to cope with until a breaking point. The psychologist said, and quote, "There could have been underlying problems within the family, but they seemed to cope with them without raising alarms." It was also suggested that Timur might have experienced a sudden acute psychotic episode. The psychologist added, "Unfortunately, such conditions can be difficult to identify or foresee in advance. In principle, this could happen to almost any teenager." After being notified about the tragedy, Timur's father came to Patrickivo. He collected his son's body from the morgue and took him back to the Kherson district, where he lived. to hold a separate funeral away from the rest of the family. Meanwhile, the village of Patrakivo covered the funeral costs for the rest of the family, who were laid to rest together. As for the home where the tragedy occurred, it now stands empty. After the officers sealed the house, no one has entered since. Many neighbours have also left the area, finding it too painful to look at the house where the family once lived. This case is horrific, but I'm still puzzled as to why he did it. I guess only Timur himself could answer this. I mean, his upbringing wasn't perfect, but neither is most people's. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.